The Flash, a superhero I don't know a ton about other than his signature ability, but unlike some other intros like Daredevil's, I'm reading an entirely new writer, penciler, and inker, so it's really going to be a completely new experience for me for the first time in nearly 2 months. I've heard so many great things about Mark Waid in particular, so I'm really excited to see his style. And while I usually don't talk about the writer's prefaces all that much, here it's bizarrely essential. Much like Miller's Daredevil again, my experience is butchered by the bizarre choice to make the 50th anniversary special, which is basically a love letter to the long Flash history, the first entry in this collection. And not only is this issue 80 pages long, you really need to have so much pre-existing knowledge and emotional attachment for any of this to realistically hit. For example, here's what you need to know before getting into this. There is Jay Garrick, the original Flash from like the 50s, Barry Allen, the Flash from like the 70s and 80s, and Wally West, the Flash from the 90s, who's basically Wade's version of the character, and whose origin isn't even covered until later in the volume. On top of that, there's a fourth Flash, John Fox from the future, traveling back in time to the first three, and none of this is even touching the fact that you have a complete lack of emotional attachment if you didn't know them prior. Each of the 4 protagonists get like a few pages to speedrun their personalities, but it's messy, and if this were me, this should have been at the end since it started me off with a pretty poor taste in my mouth. Now what gave me a great taste though is the art. There are a bunch of different artists throughout this volume, but with very few exceptions, I enjoyed them all. There's also a different artist for each of the Flash's eras, like Jay's time for instance feels like they're trying to really mimic a comic with that era's art and writing, which I really appreciate, versus like Wally, you can really see the more modern style and panel design. Spy, no, I think he was just a guy who really likes to blow things up. It's also really cute that the same villain is in all 3 eras, like he is the definition of a generational hater. But when we start to jump eras though, it gets a little messy. There are just so many writers involved, it's just too many cooks in the kitchen. Like Barry's era specifically has so much physics jargon, which honestly shocked me in general, but it really hurts the pacing with these constant interruptions. The best I can really say about Professor Fallout, who is the villain, is like he can be pretty funny. In that same era, his plan is to nuke the city and then buy up all the real estate once it's devalued, which is something I'd expect to see in like 60s Spider-Man. And his costume also evolves with the eras, kind of like a Pokemon, and by the time the modern day comes around, he genuinely looks menacing, whereas in Jay's he looked like an absolute doofus. Equally shocking to the amount of physics jargon is how bad the action is. Maybe my expectations were a little too high, but I was really never that invested in any specific fight. And it only gets worse in the future, which aside from having like the best panel design of the bunch, is pretty uninteresting to me. There's another time traveling issue that I adored later in the volume, so it really makes this one seem pretty dull in comparison. It's also hilarious though, like the 3 named characters in the future are Vidar, Mota, and John, and I'll let you guess which one is the 4th Flash. The plot is also not doing it either. After making such a big deal about going back in time to recruit the 3 Flashes, John fails at all 3, but then solves the whole situation by just finding the time traveling treadmill. So effectively, the last 70 pages had no consequence. Much like the Spider-Man annuals, we get some cool behind the scenes, but it actually covers events that we'll see later on, like Wally's origins and special powers, so it all adds up to a terribly placed first issue, and I really think some of the other collections start with Wally's origin, which is absolutely the way to go. This is just way too much to throw at you. And the next issue is an annual, also placed pretty poorly, but it's a little bit better. Again, like I have no real complaints with the art at this point, but holy exposition. I am not saying I need an origin to start every single character, but when some of these events are going to be covered as if we hadn't just been told them, it creates an experience where I'm not really sure what info I need to retain. I know the Flash is kind of known for these time traveling stories, but there are just way too many zigzags. Like we go from an unknown time trying to find this thing called the Monarch to the present day, then to a flashback to a less distant future where Wally is retired, and I'm just trying to understand what's going on 100 pages in. Man, the exposition in general is so awkward, and it's clear to me that at least the first third of this volume would be way more enjoyable if I had any context to the character. Like for example, there are just so many characters dropped in with seemingly no explanation. Maybe something's wrong with me, I won't discount that possibility, but I'm pretty consistently confused. Like we got got 2 pages explaining we need to find this thing called the Monarch, but then 30 pages for a flashback fetch quest of a retired Wally trying to find his son. And it's not like information in general is scarce. Intentionally, there's a ton of narration and dialogue, it's just not utilized super well. Everyone just announces exactly what they're thinking with next to no subtlety. Unfortunately, it eventually robs a lot of promising sequences of their stakes just because I don't feel attached to anyone in a meaningful way. Focusing on just Wally, since that's Waid's Flash, I've only seen him as a meaningless character in the special and a retired one in this annual. It's like if I showed you your first Michael Jordan clip when he's a wizard or like playing golf.
Pocket sand.
I do like that the Flash fights are kind of like puzzles in a video game that he needs to solve. Like, that's a great idea, but the execution is just a little too complicated and often relies on really niche physics and kind of like an intricate understanding of his powers, which of course I don't really know yet. And when we finally get out of this flashback, it's after like 50 pages on the last page of the whole issue. And I don't even need to tell you that this storyline is not brought up in the rest of the volume. Again, without sounding like a broken record, I think the ordering of this collection might have hit after learning about this character, but as it is, it's extremely forgettable. So I can breathe a sigh of relief when we finally get Wally's origin. And if you're reading this for the first time like me, start right here. I think the regular Born to Run compilation does, but this is 100% the starting point they should have gone with. Born to Run Year 1 is the opposite of the last two, where they have arcs you'd really need to look at a wiki to fully get. Here, we start simple. I can see how some people wouldn't like the slower start, but I really enjoyed it. It gives like the Man Without Fear by spending a lot of time with 10-year-old Wally, and it's gone to great lengths to get me to root for him. I like how he gets his powers before any tragedy happens, and the fact that he's doing all of this as a little kid makes this a pretty fun, distinct, and cute origin. And having Barry be Wally's mentor is great to bridge those gaps, especially for folks like me who are going blind into both. And mad respect to all the cool ways they show speed in a static medium, like here when they show how fast Wally's catching the ball with this little stopwatch. They might over-explain a little bit here, but I'm totally fine with it since it is a lot to take in. And you know, we get a lot of just like those nice moments. I really appreciate it when comics just make you smile, and this origin has a lot of content that I can only really explain as like good for you. It just feels like eating a good piece of fruit. This whole issue really feels like you're experiencing it from Wally's 10-year-old POV. I don't know how much of this is intentional, but like this little silly computer UI, it just feels like overall this world is brighter through Wally's eyes. For instance, the villain in this is so ridiculously over the top. I usually will read out like some of the silly dialogue, but I just could not get through some of this. It's way too funny. And Barry also doesn't just like die, he gets some really good time to shine in these beautifully brightly colored pages. I think it was very smart of Waid to go ground Wally a bit more, especially considering how crazy it gets later. And the chief example here is Wally's divorced parents, and coupled with some great kid dialogue, it leads to Wally feeling like one of the realest people in any comic I've read. Like Daredevil gets abused as a child, Batman loses his parents, but Wally just has a normal, tough life, and sometimes that hits harder. And when Wally runs away because he can't accept not being able to use his powers because of like plot reasons, I got so excited because it's exactly what I want in one of these videos. Intimate, human, and empathetic protagonists. The culmination of this part is when Wally straight up accepts the fact that he might die using his powers, and it is done so well it really makes his bravery pretty notable. Coupled with simple but effective art, this is one of my favorite parts in the whole volume. But did they really kill Barry and Iris, who's his mom, off page? I think it is probably shown eventually, I just have to imagine that, but this time skip to adult Wally is jarring to say the least. Well, maybe we can get like a teaser or some kind of mystery. Nope, you'll get Aquaman filler and you'll like it. This was bizarre. It straight up felt like there was another origin issue just like cut for some reason, because this jump makes zero sense. We go from time skip where Barry and Iris are revealed to be dead to Wally on a cruise with this other character, Linda, who I haven't met, and then Aquaman is here, but he's evil because he's possessed by this lady. This plotline is such a nothing burger. Flash just like needs to find this crown for her. And then Aquaman is like, I am not Aquaman. I am Enlil. And it's okay, wow. He was possessed by the lady, but it turns out he was actually double possessed by the crown maybe or something. I don't even know. Like, this is such a pointless twist. Maybe she was able to sheath herself from the storm. Maybe she's safe and she'll return to exact her revenge. Maybe. Nah. And while the next issue doesn't give us any of the answers to our questions, it is really good. First of all, right off the bat, Flash plays basketball. I love it. And then we get introduced to one of my favorite villain designs so far, Abracadabra. He's a villain from Barry's time who is a time traveler who had technology so advanced it looked like magic. And I know, another time traveler story, but this one is really, really good, I promise. I know I just said it, but I just love Abra's design. He is such a stark contrast to any villain we've gotten so far. Eventually, we meet another futurist who is just trying to retrieve Abra to stand trial in their time, but in order to save civilians, Flash jumps in front and they both get sucked into the 64th century. And the art in the future is just like so cool and unique. It is really not your run-of-the-mill time traveler tale. So Abra is apprehended and taken to an administrator of the Chronarch. And like, no, it's not a revolutionary concept for the future to have a big hive mind with no free will, but it's cool, it's creative, and it's done really well. I generally hate it when the future is too similar to the present, but Waid said, I hear you. Like, for example, the speech bubbles for the Chronarch are all altered, and the vocabulary also is so whack. Pray to the cacophonous discord of individuality. The Chronarch's design also is so sick. This is high and tall the best future segment so far. And like, he totally could have just ended it there, but then they make Abracadabra a sympathetic revolutionary freedom fighter, and he and Flash work together to overthrow this tyrannical futuristic society, and this is great stuff. I don't know if it's more like Flash or Waid, but the tone here is really unique too. Do I really have the right to overthrow the government and throw this entire society into pandemonium? Do I? Yeah. Oh yeah. But the volume compiler said hold my beer because there's like no transition to the next issue. Like, where's the cover? What am I reading? Would you kindly wiggle your fanny? Unfortunately, these last 40 pages are completely unengaging to me with a bunch of forgettable villains with no real context. There are also some pages in this one that are just like hard to understand what's going on, and it's a pretty unenjoyable experience. I don't even think I'd call it filler necessarily, since it does give the vibe it's gonna eventually tie into something notable, but again, like, did I miss an issue? The transitions here are so random. Like, maybe these characters got really cool stories, but this is not one of them. It's sad because this origin and Abracadabra are like so marred by this lackluster beginning and ending. I guess I also kind of thought it'd be funnier. It was pretty surface level dialogue at best. I am interested in reading more, but I really feel like I have to be careful which collection because this one just did not do it for me. If this video did it for you, I think you'd really like my other reading this hero for the first time videos. I just made this playlist for it and I'm linking it in the top right. Next week, I'm gonna be reading my very first Image Comics comic with the allegedly most successful independent comic of all time, Spawn. So if you don't want to miss that, hop on board and subscribe. And as always, if you have another hero or series you want me to take a look at with fresh Gen Z eyes, drop me a comment. I read every single one. As for Flash by Mark Waid, book 1, it has really high highs, but is hurt by this bizarre ordering and sequencing of issues. And the lack of a singular voice or pen threads over 300 pages makes this a mixed experience. Unlike some of the other comics I've scored around this range, I do have faith that this will get better, but in the end, I'll have to give Flash by Mark Waid, book 1, a 4 out of 10. Have a good one. Peace.